and talk about something that's actually happening now and more urgent, which is, lo and behold, a new virus. Well, not a new virus, a virus we actually know about, has, for all sorts of accidental reasons, slipped its way into the gay male community, or men who have sex with men more generally, and is now spiraling out of control in Europe. And increasingly, we seem to see in the United States. We don't know quite yet. Where are we, Peter? Why have we learned anything from the past with this new virus?
Well, we should name it. It's not HIV. It's monkeypox.
Monkeypox. It's a monkeypox. It's there was a song at
virus
show.
ever.
You know, I love it. It's a show. There was a Showgirls song here in Provincetown at the weekly drag show where the leading performer just did it to the theme tune of the Monkeys. Hey, hey, now it's monkeys. And yes, lots of gay men were laughing, but also a lot of them were a little worried, more than
And
worried.
as with AIDS, there already is a great deal of dark humor percolating around this new virus that's hitting gay men in the US and in countries in Europe. So first off, I mean, the top line lesson is that we have to do better US leadership on fighting bugs in the rest of the world. We often ignore them when they're percolating in other countries, and they will invariably reach our shores when we do that. COVID proved that. COVID variants have proved that. And now monkeypox is proving that. But this has been hugely, hugely frustrating. Once again, the AIDS activists who jump into every bug doing advocacy. We added monkeypox to our portfolio a few months ago. Prep for All is, I think, the number one leader in monkeypox advocacy with the Biden administration. And at this point, we're pretty exasperated, knocking our heads against a wall, but also trying to stay focused on the present and near future as much as we can, because that's obviously the most important thing in front of us. But the mess that we have found ourselves in is, shocking, very upsetting. A lot of people in the gay community are comparing it to AIDS, which I think is an outrageous comparison. This is not the Reagan administration. Homophobia did not cause these fuck-ups, but it is COVID 2.0. It's not AIDS 2.0. It's COVID 2.0. We have not learned any lessons. We have not fixed any of the HHS agencies, FDA, CDC, BARD, that messed up.
Remind us what BARDA is. So that,
BARDA is also under the HHS umbrella, and that's the emergency stock. They run the emergency stockpiles. They are in charge of biodefense, and they're supposed to leap in with pandemic response. And they also ran Operation Warp Speed with the vaccines, coupled with the U.S. military. So, and it's actually a Defense Department. Excuse me, it's not HHS, but it works closely with HHS. It's under the Defense Department's portfolio. So it's supposed to be an emergency response, and it's a mess. We are now kind of convinced that there's a bit of a cover-up happening it's very similar to what we saw with the CDC at the beginning of COVID, where the initial tests for COVID that the CDC produced weren't working. And everyone else in government was screaming at them what's going on. Redfield, who was the CDC director at that time under Trump, was telling everyone else on the task force, Fauci and Birx and even HHS Secretary Azar, we're fixing it, we'll have it fixed in a few days. And he strung them along like that for a good 2, almost 3 weeks, before Azar just threw down the guillotine and kind of pushed Redfield into the background. And then the FDA stepped in and opened up the testing apparatus. We're seeing that same kind of bureaucratic where they get caught with their pants down and they get very quiet, or they say, we've got this, so that the other people in the government hold on a second and wait for them to fix it. And it doesn't get fixed. And that's what happened in May and June with monkeypox, both on testing with the CDC and then most acutely with the vaccine supplies that are all sitting there in freezers in Denmark, enough to probably snuff out the epidemic in June. And the FDA and BARDA were telling officials at HHS, including at NIAID, that those were filled and finished and ready to go. And they weren't. They weren't inspected, and they weren't, and worst of all, they weren't willing to accept the fact that they were had already passed their inspection with the EU equivalent of the FDA. So
Now, I just want to provide some background for our listeners for this, because they're not as up on it as you are. Essentially, monkeypox entered a few what might have been dance clubs, sex clubs in Europe during the height of the spring, late spring, got into the US. Happily, the US has been developing a vaccine for monkeypox for quite some time, spending a couple of $1 billion on getting it ready. There are 1 million doses actually ready to go. There are many, many multiple more million that can be expedited to be ready to go. And they're sitting in a freezer in Denmark, and the FDA is refusing to release them. Now, it hasn't, because it hasn't inspected the facility recently. Now, it says, and it should have done, according to an agreement it had with the European Medical Agency, which is the one is the FDA equivalent in Europe. But they're now saying they didn't have an agreement with the EMA on vaccines, other things, but not vaccines.
Yeah, they basically,
which they should have done by now.
yeah, they've had a practice of accepting EMA sign-offs for small molecule drugs, which are the kind of the simplest drugs to make. So they basically trust them on the easy stuff, but they don't trust them on the hard stuff, which includes all vaccines, almost all biologics. And frankly, it's arrogance. The EMA has done a far better job on COVID all around, both on testing and vaccines. And we should be at it. This is AIDS 2.0 in this sense that we are hearing on the calls that we're having. We are hearing the same arrogance from FDA officials that ACT UP heard in September of '89, when we sat down with all the FDA commissioner, Frank Young, and all his deputies, and listed our demands, and just got this wall of arrogant resistance of, this is how we do things, and we're not budging. And we just heard that last week from, I won't name him, but he's pretty famous from the COVID years, and he had a very stiff back. And
I just saw a quote this morning, I think in the New York Post, of the FDA is the gold standard. We will blah, 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 blah. No actual. See, here's what I understand. Here you have a virus that we have already got a vaccine for. It's known, which is why it's not HIV and not even COVID. This is a known virus that we actually already have prepped vaccines. This is the perfect test case for nipping an epidemic in the bud. Now, let's say everything that you've told us is true and valid. There must be a way in which someone in the executive branch, using that word correctly, executive, to actually say, we need to stop this now. We need to get the FDA doing it now. We need to cut whatever red tape is in the way. And we need to get these vaccines into the arms of men who have sex with men in America, or we're just sitting back and watching a really ugly, nasty, painful, difficult, disfiguring virus to just spread exponentially in this community, and of course, in due course, other communities. And we don't fully know quite how it's transmitted. The word I hear all over the street, and I'm right in the middle of Bear Week here in Provincetown, so there's a lot of chatter, is no real close skin-to-skin contact. Well, then I look at these dance clubs and I look at the bear tea dance, and it's nothing but jammed bodies next to each other. And they have a pathetic number of 7,000, I think, for New York City, which is insane. I want to know why the bigger gay groups are not talking about this, why they're not talking to the president why they aren't making, I want to know how we can make more noise about
Yeah.
this.
Well, I mean, we do have access to the highest levels, which is great. I mean, we are doing weekly calls with all these agencies, and we are trying not to tie them up with what we think is questions about what we think is a cover up for these early failures, and just trying to get the doses that are in Denmark here. The good news is that the inspection is done. It happened last week.
It is
The
the FDA already did the
the
inspection.
factory inspection is done. It started last week, and they departed Denmark on Saturday. There has to
Wow.
be lot inspections, which are they test each lot that ran through the line, and they randomly test it to see if it's exactly the vaccine that was supposed to be made and pure and as advertised. There's no deviation, and those should be done pretty damn quickly, and we expect to see a huge increase. All of that stuff is coming in the next couple of weeks. So we've been getting dribs and drabs, which is why I just spent an hour on New York City's website getting an appointment for the guy I'm dating these days. And it was it was an unbearable website experience, but I managed to snag a slot for him. But we should have 300,000 doses in the next few weeks, 700,000 doses by the end of the summer, additional $800,000 by the fall, and a total of 2.2 million doses in the first half of 2023. And that's only what's been ordered. If we need more than that, all totals up to over 4 million. If we need more than that, they are very willing to purchase more and get it going, hopefully in time. But
Well, that is
it
good
is good
news.
news. But, how we got to, by any measure, if you have an emergency stockpile that's supposed to nip an epidemic in the bud, if you don't have those filled, finished, and ready to go into arms in month one, then the stockpile is a failure. It's a bureaucratic failure. End of sentence. And the fact that we owned these bottles, that they were filled and finished, that they were in a freezer, and that they were not ready to go, not for 1 week, not for 1 month, not for 2 months, but now close to 3 months. While this thing has doubled every week exponentially in the US, while we went through Pride Week, and right now, all the infections that are happening now, we're getting a burst this week. Those were mostly infections that happened over Pride. Next week, we're going to see a July 4th burst, and, there'll be a little Bear Week burst out of P-Town. So it's very frustrating, and a lot of us are telling people to cool it for a month until they get their appointment. And I think that would be very wise. This has not killed a single person, this round of monkeypox in the West, but you do not want to get this. It is hell. It is the most painful infection you can get. You will spend a few weeks crying, literally crying every time you try to use the toilet. And it's a very, very frightening, scary bug to catch. So if you can cool it for a month until you get your vaccination, and you have to wait another 2 weeks after that for your immune system to kick in. And this would be the fastest schedule if you're desperate to get out there. You probably have pretty good protection 2 weeks after your first shot. Now, the official recommendation is you have to wait 2 weeks after your second shot, which you get a month to 6 weeks later after the first shot. But a lot of people aren't going to get their second shots in time, and they'll get them, and they're always going to be incredibly useful as a second shot. But New York City is already making a decision that we're going to hold off on the second shots until we get a lot of first shots done. And that's probably, from a public health standpoint, a smart decision.
Yeah, I noticed that in Europe they are actually doing a first round of
First
just
shots.
single
Yeah.
single shots. I want to just briefly say that I'm really proud of Provincetown that they have managed to leverage quite a lot of vaccines into the town. I was able to get my vaccine on
Excellent.
Saturday,
Yeah.
last Saturday. So I'm feeling a lot less nervous at tea dance. I'm feeling a little less nervous
You have
at
to
tea
wait 2
dance.
weeks after your shot. Just remember.
Really? Okay. Well, I'm just hanging out at the time.
Okay.
It shouldn't be too. But again, we don't really know how it's transmitted. Anyway, I guess we'll find out.
No, we do
But
know. We do know how
presumably,
it's transmitted. I mean, this is. I mean, when it's skin to skin. I mean, most frequently with gay men, it's happening during sex. What we're not sure about is the percentage of transmission that's happening with just rubbing on the dance floor, chest
yeah,
to chest, or that type of thing. But we do know that most of the sores are direct infections from other sores. They develop by other sores touching that area, somebody else's sore touching
right.
that area, which means we're seeing them on the penis and around the anus, including inside. So, and those are obviously extraordinarily painful.
So these are that what matters is that someone has developed a sore that can transmit it. Without the sores, there's much less chance of transmitting it. Is that
Less
the idea?
chance, but you can still transmit. And when you are positive, you can even transmit through talking very closely with somebody over an extended period of time. It is transmissible. It has a history in Africa of being transmissible through droplets coming out of the mouth. So kissing, if the person is infected, can transmit it. So yeah, it's a hard one to avoid.
If someone, I'm just asking questions that other men have asked me this last week, as if I know anything. But the if even if you've got it and you get the vaccine, like maybe you don't even know you've got it, but you get the vaccine, the symptoms are likely to be less severe with the
Right.
vaccine.
It acts as kind of a double, both as a vaccine preventative and as a treatment, as it were.
Okay.
It can help reduce the symptoms and duration.
So if you are a man out there listening to this who may be having intimate or close contact with anyone, but especially gay men and sex, hold off or get a shot as soon as you can. The more we can protect each other, the better it is. Take it from Peter Staley, who's been through a few of these nightmares before. It's not AIDS and it's not homophobia. It is viruses and federal dysfunction. And I hope we can figure out a way to make sure that these vaccines of all kinds that we have stockpiles of can be used quickly and can be distributed and put in arms as soon as possible to prevent this from going much further. What do you think, Peter, is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be a huge wave? Do you think? I mean, how many do we have now? How many cases do we know in the
Oh God,
U.S.?
I've lost count.
Okay, roughly. I mean, I'm not going to hold
I
you
think
to this, but it,
it's over 1,000 now, I believe,
okay.
and it's considered a big undercount. So
So
yeah,
yeah,
we've got thousands, and it seems to be doubling every week. The question is now whether we've reached a point where the flood of vaccines that comes to us over the next few months is enough to snuff out such a high level of transmission so that we don't have endemic monkeypox with us for the rest of our lives, that we always have to worry
which
about
would
that
be
as gay men,
which would
which
be
would be
awful,
absolutely awful.
awful.
Yeah.